Welcome to Tactical Talk. This is Zain Khan. Today, the topic of our show is the Russian and Turkish Idlib safe zone deal. Today, the guest of our show is Merve Şebnem Oruc, who is a Turkish journalist and also a Turkish talk show host. Welcome to our show, Merve. This is Zain Khan. It is a pleasure having you on Tactical Talk.
Yeah, it's been really long, Zain. It's good to be back.
Merve, let's get to the first question. Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin of Turkey agreed the deal in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. Tell us details of what really went on there. Please explain to us what exactly did Turkey and Russia agree to?
I can start with saying that after weeks of escalating tensions and fear in Idlib, which is the northwestern province of Syria, on Monday night, millions of people were able to sleep without fear again. Idlib is the last remaining stronghold of the Syrian opposition, as you know, Zain, and there are around 4 million civilians there. They mostly came from other cities like Hama, Homs, Aleppo, and recently Dera, Eastern Ghouta, which Assad regime assaulted heavily and took all of them back. Before the civil war, the population of Idlib was under actually 1 million, and we can say that mostly the population was increased because of this internally displaced people. Turkey doesn't want Idlib to share the same fate with other cities, other provinces where thousands were dead, were killed, and millions were displaced. As you know, the two leaders met in Sochi this week, 10 days after the Tehran summit. In Tehran summit on September 7th, Hassan Rouhani, Iranian president, hosted both Erdogan and Putin. It was the most important topic of the agenda of this summit, which was surprisingly televised live by Tehran without informing both Turkish and Russian counterparts. And needless to remind to all of us, there was no solution on the table after this summit. But in Sochi, finally, there is one. Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed to establish a demilitarized zone, a buffer zone around Idlib. According to this deal, this buffer zone in question will be 15 to 20 kilometers deep. It will be established until October 15, and it will be protected by Turkish and Russian troops that will conduct coordinated patrols there. So, in that way, the borders of Idlib will be protected and Idlib's current status will be preserved. Radical groups such as the former Al-Qaeda affiliate Hayat Tahrir al-Sham will be ordered to leave this zone, this 15 to 20 kilometer zone, according to the Sochi deal. And in addition to that, all the heavy weapons, I'm not talking about light arms, the heavy weapons will be taken away from the region. And in addition to that, the Syrian regime will also gain the key M5 highway passing along North Hama and South Idlib that connects the north of the country with other major cities of Syria. We can say that Russia guarantees this in favor of Syrian regime, and actually a relatively independent opposition group, Jaish al-Izza, it's not Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has been currently controlling a portion of this highway, but I believe Turkey will not have a problem to secure secure the deal, at least its part, and I believe Russia will do the same.
Okay, Merve, let's get to a very important question. Some say that this deal was a geopolitical win for Turkey. Is that true or exaggerated?
Well, Idlib was and still is a red line for Turkey. You know, Turkey is already hosting more than 3 million, maybe around 4 million Syrian refugees since the beginning of the civil war. And Turkey says that it cannot take any more people fleeing the Assad regime's bombardments. So any potential Idlib offensive could uh, cause a new refugee influx. But also, we don't want to see another humanitarian catastrophe across our borders. In addition to this risk involved with a new refugee influx, Turkey sees Idlib as a matter of national security, and that's why it does not want to leave the region. You know, the Reyhanlı town, which saw a twin car bomb attacks in 2013, and which was, you know, organized by Assad regime, is 5 kilometers away from Syrian border, and it's a neighbor to Idlib. So that's why Turkey has been urging Russia and Iran not to betray this Astana process, which started in 2016, and let Turkey to clear the terrorist elements like Al-Qaeda affiliates or other radical groups from Idlib without bloodshed. So I believe this Sochi deal marks a major diplomatic victory for Turkish President Erdogan. You know, he has not stopped looking for ways to prevent a major Syrian regime attack in Idlib, like he tried to do anywhere else in Syria. But in the meantime, I believe this deal means a significant step for Russian leader Putin as well. You know, Putin is a long-time ally, long-time supporter of Bashar al-Assad regime, but also he's a key figure in Syria who can prevent more bloodshed. So I believe this is a geopolitical victory for both sides. You know, this kind of moves was expected mostly from the United Nations, or at least United Nations Security Council, but they failed in Syria many times, as they failed everywhere around the world recently. So I believe both leaders, but especially Erdogan, made a significant move and had this significant victory for the people of Idlib for now.
Marvi, let's get to a tricky question. How does Turkey see other major players in the region in the midst of crisis after this deal? I mean, how does it see the U.S. In the region, because it's having trade war with the U.S.? How does Turkey see Syria and Iran in the region?
Yeah, I believe after this deal, nothing has changed, Zain. And your question is actually a very, very long story, you know. Let's start with Washington. Turkey wants Washington to stop supporting YPG militias, YPG terrorist groups in Syria. You know, YPG is the armed branch of PYD, which is the Syrian branch of outlawed PKK. PKK is a listed terror organization in Turkey, but not only in Turkey, it's also listed as a foreign terror organization by the US and the EU as well. This spring, actually, Turkey and Washington, Ankara and Washington reached a deal over Manbij town, which is the last place controlled by YPG on the western side of Euphrates River. According to this agreement, the PYD was going to withdraw from Manbij, and Ankara saw this agreement as an opportunity which would in time turn into a model for the rest of northern Syria. which is controlled by mostly PYD, with the support of American troops. Yeah, but the Membiches agreement is still in process. It's still proceeding, but the United States is acting very slowly. On the other hand, when we look at Iran, Iran doesn't see PYD as a big problem as Turkey sees. But Tehran, wants the United States out of Syria. As Iran has become a threat once again for the United States during Trump administration, Washington wants Iran out of Syria as well. Iran is the long supporter of Assad regime and have invested in Syria and in Syria war a lot for the sake of Assad and does not want to leave the war-torn country. And if it does, actually, all the wins and gains will belong to Russia. Assad regime also does not want Iran to leave, as Iran is the most trusted country for Damascus for now. But on the other hand, Israel sees Iran and Iran-backed militias in Syria as a threat. That's why they carried more than 200 airstrikes toward Iran bases in Syria. Turkey does not want to see this kind of wars within civil war. But it's too big to stop actually right now. Turkey sees Assad regime as responsible for the civil war since the beginning. He is the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people there. But if we come back to Israel's seeing Iran as a big threat, as a major threat in Syria. There was a last attack targeting Iran militias in Latakia and Hama at Monday night, the night the Sochi deal was reached. And it resulted in an so-called accidental shooting down of a Russian plane in Latakia. The Kremlin officials, as you followed, blamed Israel for acting irresponsibly and pushing a Russian spy plane into Syrian line of fire. The Russian spy plane was actually hit 35 kilometers offshore as it was returning to its home base in Latakia, and it was exposed to a friendly Syrian missile fire that was directed against this Israeli air raid nearby. However, the Russians have been tolerating Israel, which has conducted hundreds of airstrikes. In the meantime, Israel has never targeted Russian military. Instead, they wanted to have good relations with Russia, which is basically operating as the air forces of Syrian regime. Even though Russian Ministry of Defense accused Israel of informing themselves just a minute before the airstrikes, Putin chose to say that the cause of the downing of the plane was a chain of tragic accidental circumstances. After he spoke on the phone with Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu. But on the other hand, offering condolences to Russia, Netanyahu said they didn't down Russian aircraft, but also he accused Syrian regime, and he added that they were ready to assist Russia during the probe by providing all the necessary information. So I believe he was implying that Syrian regime not accidentally could have shut down Russian planes. So I believe we will never know what actually happened there. We will never know that if it was really an accident or not. But in short, I can say that this Syria issue is still too complicated for all of us in the region. The allies, even Russia, Iran, and Assad regime, are not on the same page anymore. So it's getting complicated and complicated every day.
Marvi, let's get to the last question. There are two narratives regarding the Idlib deal. There are two narratives coming out. One narrative says that, this deal has saved Idlib from a humanitarian crisis. The other narrative is saying that this deal is just delaying the collision which is going to happen in Idlib. What is your opinion? Which narrative is closer to the truth, according to your opinion?
Well, it's a long-term issue, but I can say that in best-case scenarios, Zain, Erdogan and Putin has spared the lives of millions in Idlib. Once this demilitarized buffer zone is successfully established, and if they can do it, the millions of people trapped there will be spared and saved. I believe that. And even if this Sochi deal would not be a final solution because the circumstances in Syria is too complicated, I believe it will help, this deal will help Turkey to gain more time and more leverage in Idlib by increasing its troops on the ground. And, actually, avoiding internal clashes and major offensives, which would risk the lives of civilians. Turkey has already been pressuring the mainstream opposition fighters to join forces for a year in Idlib. And it's trying to get substantial results with regards to eliminating Al-Qaeda-linked groups. For instance, this winter, Ahrar al-Sham and Nurettin Zingi, two of the biggest major mainstream groups, they came together and formed the Syrian Liberation Front, while more than 10 Free Syrian Army factions merged under the National Liberation Front flag. By uniting all these groups, and I believe Turkey has a finger in it, Turkey has pushed them to confront the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the former Al-Qaeda affiliate, which is already unpopular among Idlib's civilians. As a matter of fact, this Syrian Liberation Front and the National Liberation Front started to get really critical results since February, repelling the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They took control of more than 40 critical points, including highly populated towns in the province, especially Jisr Shur, which is the only Jisr Shur has been left, but many towns, many cities in southern and eastern sides of Idlib are now being controlled by mainstream groups. The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham withdrew mostly to the western parts of Idlib. It was losing power and influence in the region, and they report that, according to reports I'm talking, they were considering about dissolving the group soon. But a potential regime attack in Idlib and these major offensive reports, they did not help the mainstream groups in Idlib. A regime attack in Idlib would have not only derail Turkey's efforts to eliminate terrorist elements in the region, but also they help Al-Qaeda-linked groups to regain power. Such an attack would stop the mainstream opposition groups from confronting Al-Qaeda groups. Even worse, actually, this kind of attack may push them to join forces with them to resist the regime together. So, actually, there are a lot to talk, but in sum, I believe the Sochi deal will at least help Turkey to gain more time, more leverage, and in that way, it will be able to take all control in Idlib province to succeed its agenda.
Thank you so much, Merve Şebnem Oruc, for being on Tactical Talk. It's always a pleasure having you.
It was really nice to be with you again. Talk to you soon again, Zain. Take care.
This was Merve Şebnem Oruc, a Turkish journalist and also a Turkish talk show host. We were discussing the Idlib safe zone deal. Until the next episode of Tactical Talk, this is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.